Hello again. Welcome to Alex's ESL World. Today I'm going to talk about modals having to do with advice, regret, and criticism. First, let's look at how we ask for and give advice. As you can see, there are three expressions that we use to give advice: should, ought to, and had better. The sentence pattern we use is the same for all three of these. They are the subject, followed by the modal, or the modal-like expression, then the base verb. Let's look at some examples for each one of these. For should, you should get your passport soon. Or in the negative, you shouldn't forget to pay your bills. So the not comes directly after the modal and before the base verb. For ought to, he ought to finish his project before he starts another one. You might hear someone say, he ought not to say mean things, but we usually don't use ought to in the negative. In fact, there are areas in the U.S. where ought to is rarely used at all. Where I come from in the South, ought to is very common, but in California, it's not so common. In the negative, it's even less common in California. Finally, had better. We had better call Uber or we might be late. And in the negative, we had better not be late or we might miss our plane. Now for the rules about these modals. The first rule about using should and ought to, and by the way, they mean exactly the same thing. The sentence pattern, like I showed you before, is subject, should or ought to, plus the base verb. These are used to give advice, and should is more common than ought to. Let's see some examples. You should pack some warm clothes. Everyone ought to watch the political debates. I really believe this one. If you don't watch the debates, how are you going to know who to vote for? Rule number 2. When we use had better plus a base verb, we're giving strong advice or even a warning. Had better means there are serious consequences if the advice isn't followed. Some examples are, you had better do your homework or you might fail. And we'd better take a taxi to the airport or we might miss our flight. Rule number 3. Negative statements will use should not or had better not. You can also use ought not to, but as I said before, this is not common. If you're asking for advice or giving advice, you need to use should. Here's some examples. You shouldn't drink coffee that is too hot. Do you know the story of the woman who sued McDonald's for a couple $1 million because she got coffee there and it spilled in her lap and gave her serious burns? People laugh and they think it's ridiculous, but she was an elderly woman and she got very seriously burned. McDonald's doesn't even sell coffee that hot anymore. Okay, another example. We had better not be late. Yes, sometimes there are serious consequences for being late. Finally, an example of asking for advice is, should I wear this suit today? Maybe I'm going on a job interview or I have an important meeting, so I want to look my best. I just don't know if this suit is the best thing. I need your advice. Okay. Rule number 4. When you need to give advice or ask for advice in the progressive, you need to use should or should not be, ought to be or had better not be, plus the base verb, plus ing. Examples? You shouldn't be texting in class. This is a big problem in some schools in the U.S. You ought to be exercising more. My doctor tells me this, and it's true. I need to get away from the computer more, but it's so much fun making these videos for you. Okay, one more example. You'd better be listening to the teacher. Yes, that's what I say. Finally, rule number 5. Be careful of this one. Had better is not used in the past, even though we know had is past for have, past tense. In the expression had better, it's only used for present and future. For example, You had better hurry or we'll be late. And we'd better start packing. Do you start packing for trips a long time before the trip is going to happen? I usually do. I guess I get excited about the trip and I want to think about what I might need. It makes the experience longer than just taking the trip. My husband isn't like that. He's a very good planner, but for some reason he starts packing just before he has to leave. That's no fun. Okay, that's all you need to know about asking for and giving advice. Another way we use should is to show regret or criticism. In this case, we're going to use should have plus the past participle of a verb. I'll show you how we make the statements, how we make the questions, and how we answer them. Then I'll show you a couple of rules. But first, let's look at the forms. First, statements. We make this kind of statement with this form. Subject plus should or should not have plus the past participle of the verb you're using. For example, I should have bought my ticket online. Everyone knows they're cheaper online. I shouldn't have bought my ticket from a travel agent. This is something done either by very rich people who don't mind spending extra money or by inexperienced travelers. If you're thinking about traveling for the first time, do your research. It's more expensive to pay a travel agent. Let's look at how we make questions with these modals. The form is almost the same as a statement. If you're asking a WH question, you're going to start with the WH word. Next is the subject. Then should have, and you end it with past participle. For example, should I have made more cookies? Of course, the answer to this question is always yes. You can never have too many cookies. And what should Mary have done to prepare for her test? And we know the answer to that one too. She should have studied. But how do we actually and correctly answer these questions? Here are our answers. Normally, we just give short answers. For example, the first question was, should I have made more cookies? And the answer would be either, yes, you should have, or if you're diabetic, no, you shouldn't have. The second question I asked was, what should Mary have done to prepare for her test? This answer is more likely to be longer than a short answer since it's a WH question. These are questions that require some information to be given when asked. So the answer to my question might be, Mary should have started studying sooner. I guess Mary didn't do well on her test, and that's why we're wondering what she needs to change before she takes another test. This time, we only have a couple of rules. The first one is when we want to express regret about something that happened or didn't happen in the past. We should have researched hotels before we left. And I shouldn't have stayed up so late last night. And the second way we use this is to talk about mistakes or to criticize someone for something they did or didn't do in the past. Here are some examples. We should have researched hotels before we left, and I shouldn't have stayed out so late last night. Okay, those are the rules and some examples of how we use modals to give or take advice and to talk about regret and to criticize someone. Be careful of that last one. There are cultures that see criticizing differently from others. For example, never criticize someone in the U.S. about their weight or if they have a pimple on their face or something like that. In some countries, you might be seen as being kind to point these problems out to someone, but here, people will be offended. So just be careful about criticizing someone and know that they might not appreciate your views. The last thing I want to mention is about how to pronounce these. In the United States, we like to shorten our speech. I think actually everyone does this in their own language. It's because we know it so well. We have these reduced forms. I'm going to show you how we reduce should have and shouldn't have. First of all, when I say shouldn't have, that's already a reduced form, but we reduce them even more. I'm going to show you this chart that will explain how we pronounce should have and shouldn't have. Keep in mind that this is just about how we pronounce these reductions. We should never write the sentences like this. I know there are some native English speakers who do write this, and it's because grammar's not stressed nearly enough, in my opinion, in our schools. Most people are really not interested in speaking and writing correctly. It's sad, but that's the way it is. Now, the first thing you need to know is that when we say should have and shouldn't have, we usually pronounce have like the word of. Remember, the word is have, but it sounds like of when it comes after should or shouldn't. Please never write OF for have. Just say it that way. I'm going to show you some examples of sentences using the full pronunciation and then using the reduced pronunciation. Say these aloud with me so you can practice. Ready? Okay. The full pronunciation is, we should have helped him. And the reduced pronunciation is, we should have helped him. We should have helped him. Does that sound natural? This is what you'll hear if you listen carefully to us. Next, Mildred should have asked for a ride. And the way we really say it, Mildred should have asked for a ride. Mildred should have asked for a ride. Let's keep going. Jose shouldn't have left so early. And that should sound like, Jose shouldn't have left so early. Jose shouldn't have left so early. Are you getting it? Let's look at one more. The teachers shouldn't have gone becomes, the teachers shouldn't have gone. Again, the teachers shouldn't have gone. Okay, you should have that one down by now. I have one more tip for you. In informal conversation, should have is often pronounced shoulda. Do you know that one? It's actually very common, and we do this with would have and could have as well as should have. So it's shoulda, woulda, coulda. I'm really serious about this. This is how we say it. So we can say, we should have helped the man, or we can say, we should have helped the man. These reductions are just a result of speaking quickly. Most people speak their own languages very quickly and don't even realize it. So that's the end of this lesson. I hope to be able to complete modals in the next video, but it might be a bit long. That one is about possibilities and logical consequences. For now, I should get to work on some other plans I have. It's a good thing I retired from the classroom. I wouldn't have had the time to help you out if I hadn't. So, until the next video, stay well, be happy, and don't forget to be kind to each other. Bye for now.